Yeah, I think also to comment on the politics not going away thing, I think it might be the only relevant indicator between now and the next real price move is politics. Like I don't think you're going to see Bitcoin do more than 2 or 3% up or down in a day more than a few times between now and November 5th.
Welcome in, everybody. GM, it's good to see you out there. I'm the host of Coinage, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios here in New York City. Joined today by the one and only good friend of the show, I think, good friend of mine. Having been on the panel with him before at Consensus, he joins us live here on Coinage. Jacob Martin, Two Punks Capital general partner. Jacob, good to see you, man.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, man. There's a lot to talk about, obviously. There's a lot going on in crypto right now. As we look at the charts, Bitcoin hovering around that 64K level. I know, you go crazy if you look at the price all the time, Jacob, as we're talking about, but there's a lot to dig into this week as the founder of Telegram is arrested in Paris. We're going to dig into that, as well as the shifting political landscape here in the U.S. when it comes to crypto. Kind of quiet on the Kamala Harris front. And of course, unsurprisingly, El Salvador continuing to stack Bitcoin. Before we dive into anything today, though, do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, our friends at Stand With Crypto. As you know, more than 50 million Americans hold crypto. These are entrepreneurs, innovators, and job creators who are deeply invested in building a strong America that dominates this emerging tech sector. Stand With Crypto works to mobilize the crypto community around issues and elections. You can find out more and see where candidates in your area stand at standwithcrypto.org. Jacob, I guess we can start the show just on kind of where you see the space right now, because we've had some ups, we've had some downs. You now have, I guess, one of the founders of Toncoin, if you want to call Pavel that, arrested in France. But kind of where are you putting us at in this cycle as you look at the charts and the news?
Yeah, I back right before Luna crashed was one of the first times in the market that I had ever just sold crypto because I felt
Mm-hmm.
something coming. And then a few weeks ago when ETH was at like 2950 and I think Bitcoin had just ticked below 70K was one of the first times that I had sold crypto in a while. Uh, Same energy I feel like, from a month ago is kind of still pervading, but the thing that we have to like happily remember is if we're going to look at Bitcoin at 63, 64K and
Mm-hmm.
say things are slow, or are we entering a bear, then like what a great new floor. You know what I mean? So I kind of think of it as there's not a lot of buzz, not a lot of excitement around like specifics right now. The ETF kind of already happened. Ethereum ETFs are in play. Is Solana coming? Who knows? Which political candidate is going to win and which political candidate is going to be more friendly towards crypto, I think are the next two like indicators that anyone is looking for.
Yeah,
The inflows, the outflows, they're not
well,
changing too much.
we should take a look at that too, though, because we do have CoinShares report that's looking at the inflows and things for this past week. Obviously, Jay Powell speaking on Friday, that kind of created and triggered a bit of a boom in terms of the outflows. According to CoinShares, $533 million in terms of total digital asset investment product inflows. Most of those, 543 is actually the main number, but 533 of that, basically all of it, went straight into the Bitcoin ETFs. And as you mentioned, Ethereum ETFs not exactly performing as strong as I think a lot of people thought they might. We've seen, similarly to when the Bitcoin ETFs launched, a bunch of outflows from Grayscale's trust. Where do you kind of put, I guess, the follow on? The fear was, Jacob, that when Ethereum went live, it wasn't going to stack up anywhere close to Bitcoin ETFs, so people were kind of a little worried about it. How do you kind of see it in terms of, look, even though the price collapsed a little bit earlier this summer, people are still throwing money into these ETFs?
Yeah, I think when you've got the individuals like we're probably just one Dave Ramsey bull post away from every American in the country owning a little bit of Bitcoin, right? Like the Robert Kiyosaki, Grant, and Gary Cardone, like Gary Vaynerchuk's of the world. You're talking about some of the more influential, let's say at least American internet financial, not financial advisors, but financial influencers, so to speak. They've pretty much all made clear you should own some Bitcoin. And then you look at Gen Z's biggest in biggest voices, and you're talking Logan Paul and Aiden Ross and these guys, and they all publicly own Bitcoin as well. Like I say that to say I think Bitcoin narrative has taken hold of like this is our gold or this is the next wave of gold. I
Hmm.
think Ethereum and the Ethereum ETF struggles a little more in the sense that like if Bitcoin is gold but Ethereum is the internet, what does that mean? Like what does it mean to buy a piece of the internet? So a
Yeah.
lot of casual conversations I've had, people are far more inclined. Bitcoin Nashville, I hung out with someone in just south of town who's an entertainer, and he ended up buying one whole Bitcoin and no Ethereum because he just was like, yeah, I got a Bitcoin. Like, what else should I do or why? Um,
Yeah.
and it's just a different narrative altogether compared to this is savings slash investment slash real estate slash gold. It's Bitcoin. Whereas Ethereum is the internet. What is Solana even? Right? Like, if you want to think about it that way.
Well, I was thinking about that too, just in terms of like zooming out and thinking about that narrative, like you said, it kind of gets a little confusing and there's more to track, right? The idea of like, oh, what's happening when you're buying a piece of Ethereum and how much transactions are on it and kind of, what's the inflation you got to worry about? What are the fees you got to worry about? Is L2s eaten into that? And like, can meme coins continue to rally? There's a lot that goes into, I guess, the investment thesis around Ethereum. And I think people are realizing that. And it's become a harder sell for investors, like you mentioned, to wrap their heads around it, especially if you're not deep in crypto. And I don't know. I think a lot of people might be hesitant to say, I'd be throwing my money into that when I could just do digital gold over here. And that's kind of where I think the market's at generally. We can get into, I guess, what that means from a political lens and the idea of crypto versus Bitcoin in a sec. But I do want to shift over to one of the other stories we are watching today, Jacob, which I think also kind of fits neatly into this idea of um, free speech happening this election cycle and kind of where the US is going to go relative to what's happening in Europe. And I mention Europe because this is the big story right now. It is that Telegram CEO was arrested in France. A lot of different networks, not just the crypto news publications, obviously covering this one. Details still a little bit scant in terms of why exactly Pavel Durov was arrested in France. I think we're going to learn a little bit more, but this is a big story because he's a 39-year-old Telegram founder. A lot of people call him Russia's Mark Zuckerberg. He was arrested in an airport just outside of Paris, leaving a private jet. Officials are saying he could be held there for up to 4 days, Jacob. And basically, all we know is that it's France's OFIM, the agency that works to prevent violence against minors. At the heart of this, a complaint into Telegram's lack of moderation and cooperation with law enforcement. We've heard a lot of people here in the U.S. maybe mention that, look, regulators could be cracking down on the likes of Zuckerberg or Elon Musk if free speech is attacked here. This is kind of giving fuel to those people. What do you make of this? Obviously, it's still very early, but I mean, Toncoin was down like 15% off this news as people are looking at it that way. I mean, there's a lot to dig into here.
Yeah, I think to start with, Toncoin is almost difficult in itself if Telegram is a company and Ton is a network and they are technically separate things. Like that's its own question altogether of how intertwined are they? And again, I would say to see 10 or 15%, so that's just 18% pullback on the 7 day.
Yeah.
That happens in crypto all the time. That's just like a typical Tuesday for plenty of the network, especially earlier on. And this coin's only been out for about a year, a little over a year.
Yeah.
So I would say I think the market has actually got that's a pretty solid, it's pretty steady holding for something where the leader was put in jail for existing, right? Like I think if Vitalik had gone to jail in 2016 over Ethereum or been detained, I don't think you still have Ethereum in the same way. Um, Outright, I don't know. It would have been really scary to use, and we would have all been concerned. So I think separating Ton and Pavel is interesting. It'll be interesting to see if it just continues without him, no problem,
Hmm.
or if other countries begin to crack down on executives. And I think that would be quite different if all of a sudden, all of the employees or executives of Toncoin were only capable of living in one or two countries. That would become a whole different level of uh, freedom of speech issues, of tech issues, but also I actually can't tell you if I think degenerates would bid that up or down, um, because that actually you might could see Elon catching a public bid at that point and saying, "Yeah, this thing matters and it needs to stay, it needs to exist." And if the Matrix hates it this much, you might could see everyone from Elon Musk to Andrew Tate to Joe Rogan bull posting um, Ton directly at that point, and its need for existing outside of the reach of oligarchs and monarchies and authoritarians and all of the different any of the setups you can imagine that
Yeah.
don't like this thing right now is the exact same group of people. I'd really say the same group of people that spoke at Bitcoin Nashville, plus a few that
Hmm.
the Ed Snowdens, the Russell Brands, the Andrew Tates, and the Elon Musks could all find themselves bidding Ton, or at least just being bullish the ecosystem for existing.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the questions I had for you. And you're right. By the way, Elon Musk also kind of tweeting right after this all happens, calling back to kind of what's going on here in the U.S. Also calling out Zuck, by the way, which I don't know if that's the best strategy necessarily, as a guy who's also running a platform that could have some problems here. But he basically said Instagram has a massive child exploitation problem, and
Yeah.
retweeted one of the stories digging into that, which is again, Elon stoking the flames. But I was going to ask you if, like, from an investor perspective, and obviously, you're a VC, Two Punks Capital crushing it when it comes to investing in projects. I wonder if there might be like an emphasis now when it comes to decentralization. It's kind of one of those memes in crypto, decentralization theater, where like things aren't really outside of the control of the guy running it. But there are some projects that legitimately, I think, can't be turned off anymore because
Yeah.
they are sufficiently decentralized. I mean, do you think that, like, because of things like this, investors might start to give that a premium?
I think that might should. I think that probably is a good question in that sense. I think the sufficiently decentralized but having no users and no product market fit is irrelevant.
Hmm.
So you have to have product market fit with users and people that would care if you didn't exist anymore, but also be sufficiently decentralized. I think that is um, I think that's actually the way the average person just views all the apps on their phone. I think they all
Hmm.
just kind of assume Twitter, Instagram, Signal, Telegram, whatever. They kind of just assume, oh, this is an app on my phone. I can do whatever I want with it without realizing that, like, yeah, you can do whatever you want with it. And they can also put you in jail immediately, right? Or they can also just take your data immediately, or they can turn you over immediately. But you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want, right? Like, sure, you can definitely do it. You'll just have, equal and opposite reaction to most of it. Um, and I think I think it's been interesting watching Congress over the last 6 months ask people if you watched any of the Secret Service the Secret Service situation with the woman who ended up resigning. They were
Hmm.
asking her not just was your team in a group chat or were you texting with locals, but it was like how many different fully cryptographically secure chats are you in, like Signal? How many of these Signal chats included locals? Like the Congress has gotten better to know they need to ask better questions because they can't just have access to Signal within your phone, and that
Yep.
scares them. That scares them a lot.
Well, I think it's probably a good shift into this, by the way, just to put a button on what's going on with Pavel and kind of the expectations there. Telegram did kind of put out a statement on Telegram saying Telegram CEO Pavel Durov has nothing to hide and travels frequently in Europe. It's absurd to claim that platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform. But I do think it is kind of an open question when it comes to these regulators, what they want to do with this kind of problem of regulation of tech and who is really at fault. If you think about it, you're kind of bringing up examples of, look, you can do what you want, but we can make things illegal. I'm thinking of kind of Tornado Cash in the mixer there in terms of the U.S. saying, look, this is sanctioned now. You can't really use it. And if you do, you're in trouble. And that's
Yeah,
kind of, I think, a good way to shift into this political discussion because now, a lot of people might be saying, look, Kamala Harris hasn't made her positions well known on certain things, including crypto. But now there's a huge discussion to be had, I think, in the U.S. when it comes to who is going to be, at fault when some of these questions do get answered here. And obviously, it's impacting the election market. And right now, basically back to a 50-50 on Polymarket. I don't know how quickly you track all of these things, Jacob, but I think it's fair to say that no one really has a good idea of where Kamala sits right now on crypto. Democrats are saying, look, she's going to shift pro crypto. Just wait a sec. But we've been waiting for a while, and I don't know if you're in the camp where you would be buying that shift or not.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was in a couple of group chats early on regarding Harris and crypto and like the Harris campaign and crypto and whatnot. And I was pretty interested and open to being, to considering working with them or helping with pro crypto things until multiple people identified in the, Nick Carter's work on choke point 2.0, until multiple people identified in the choke point 2.0 problems were tapped by the Harris campaign as saying we were going to use this person for this and this person for that. They're not serious about crypto, in my opinion. Not until they either put in people that are serious or remove other people that are serious problems. Um, I think the DNC doubled down on that. I think everything we've seen over the last, I don't know, I guess 2, 3 weeks just kind of proves that they don't really care that much. And I think that's totally fine for them as like a policy perspective. That's their opinion. That's how they're going to approach it. But there's when the Winklevosses are asking for meetings and then getting told if you come to this meeting we're not going to be there. It's just not. That's not a real game. It's not even a real conversation. No Republican would have ever turned down a meeting with a Zuckerberg or any other massive, leader of a massive tech company in the Bay. So
Yeah.
to have anyone blue turning down meetings with large Republican or large just pro crypto libertarians, like that's just silly. It's not a real game. Um, again, even the Trump meeting with Elon back when Elon wasn't pro Trump, about Tesla 7, 8 years ago, same thing. Like for then Biden not to meet with Elon or be pro Elon. So we've somehow turned into both parties are cool with gay, both parties are open to abortion, yet one party is vastly more pro innovation than the other. And I don't even think it's like a comparable or arguable situation. And so, as of right now, like a red vote and a blue vote are pretty clear what you're going for. Either like pro crypto and innovation or you're not. And that's the
Yeah,
single issue way to look at it. On this single issue, that's the single issue way to look at it. But like, it's easy way to look at it.
just so I heard you right too, it sounds like you were probably in the camp of trying to work because there are a crypto for Harris event. By the way, a lot of people in crypto were looking at that and watching it and like, oh, Senator Schumer is like kind of shifting pro crypto,
Yeah.
and a lot of people were optimistic and hopeful. And I think not a lot happened on that call, as you mentioned. Right now, the Democratic Party looking at people to put in positions of power, and a lot of them were not pro crypto. In fact, very antagonistic towards
Right.
the industry. I'm thinking about
Right.
Brian Deese. I'm thinking about Brian Nelson. I'm thinking about some of these people that have been floated, including Mr. Ramamurti, who is from Senator Elizabeth Warren's camp. And we all know where she sits on crypto, being an outspoken anti-crypto army raiser. And so I think if you look at those things, I would say that's for sure. But as someone who maybe would have dipped a toe in trying to help, it sounds like you were basically turned off once you saw all of that.
Yeah. I think the biggest concern with anyone that doesn't work in government but starts to like consider it or go near it is really just the word swamp and the swamp dynamics and the idea that the people running certain things have either already been there for 30 years or are taking over from a predecessor. And even some of the language in the DNC, it sounds, if you listen to the DNC right now, it sounds like we currently have a Republican president. We don't. Right? It sounds like you're arguing against a Trump campaign, a Trump presidency, and for change. But the current argument for change is for change from the Biden Harris administration. That
Yeah,
doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Like
I
it
think
just doesn't really practically make a lot of sense. So yeah, it's an awkward. I think it's kind of awkward when you look at it that way. Of like, okay, so like Democrats have run DC for 12 out of 16 years, which means anyone that she chooses to put in there has probably been there for 12 out of 16 years.
mhm.
And anyone in the choke point 2.0 camp or the Elizabeth Warren camp or right or the Gensler camp or it's like that's like several hundred people when you think about it that way that are all publicly anti-crypto so far. So why would they make any changes other than potentially to keep their job? But even
Yeah.
then, it wouldn't be a meaningful change or a change with any integrity or a change with any like oomph, right? And so, and again, I think Trump and his team have like overly bull posted crypto a little bit and overly attempted to make clear what they think they can get done. I don't think they can do 50% of what they've said so far, but I do
Well,
think
it
they
is.
can do. I do think they could do 50% of what they've said. You know,
As we've
like
been covering, I mean, it is kind of interesting that even Don Jr.'s out there floating his own DeFi program now. So it's like, it's not
I know.
even like a policy standpoint. It's also like, hey, personally, we are getting involved in this space, which I think is always interesting. We just had one of our latest videos kind of digging into Trump's 180 over the last 3 years to become so pro crypto.
Yeah.
But of course, this is just a US discussion. And I think maybe if you zoom out and think about
Yeah.
globally what this all means, I think that's important too, because we're not the only country in the world. We just have a lot of, I guess, resources to make these impacts. But one country that continues to do this, Jacob, is El Salvador. And I don't want to overlook what's going on over there, because I do think it is quite interesting just to think about how much they've been able to, I guess, dedicate to this idea of buying a Bitcoin a day. And kind of how Bukele has really set, I think, the national standard for what this might, what it should look like. What do you make of kind of how much they've stuck to this in terms of being the country that's kind of taking the torch and leading with it?
I think it's a fascinating hedge, and to own. I think we had mentioned like three or four, 400. Is it 400 million worth of Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, close to
Um,
it. 361 million on the article I'm looking at from Decrypt, and basically 6,000 Bitcoin.
like the U.S. government, like when you think of how much Bitcoin the U.S. government has compared to the U.S. GDP, and then you think of how much El Salvador has compared to the El Salvador GDP, that's almost 1%. Like it's not small, of course. 361 million off of their 32 billion or so GDP. Um, but it's also not gonna do much until they sell it. You know what I mean? So in the
Mm-hmm.
same way, like they can keep accumulating and the price can keep going up, but at some point they have to sell it all, or it doesn't actually strategically like change their government's position. Um, so I think it's more of just like a fascinating exercise of freedom of speech and of them doing whatever they want and them like helping validate the asset. But from here, I don't think Bitcoin does a 10x from here anytime soon. It's a personal opinion. I think it's going to be a little closer to the QQQ, 18 to 25% range maybe per year, which would be awesome, by the way. Um, and I think most of the large Bitcoin holders kind of agree with that. So I'm still not 100% sure what their game plan is here. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure what their goal is, because
I
at
don't
some
know
point they're
either,
just
but
going to
I
sell
do know
all
that,
of it
like,
for like a couple
him
billion
coming
dollars.
out,
You know?
it wasn't too long ago that, he was the headliner at the Bitcoin conference and like made the big announcement, we're going to make this legal tender. And, he's up like 60 million, I
Yep.
think, on it being kind of something that differentiates. And anything you can do, I mean, I think this in terms of any project out there, anything you do to like differentiate yourself to get any sort of attention is a huge step in terms of even
Totally.
us sitting here talking about it. I've never talked
Totally.
about El Salvador before in my life. No offense to the great nation that is El Salvador, but here we
Totally.
are talking about it.
Well, and one of the biggest things that it's done for them as well, in the combination of him cleaning up the country from a danger perspective and then going after the Bitcoin thing, is it's frankly changed all their headlines away from being a dangerous place.
Yeah,
Like,
until I guess
and
Trump
there's
also, if you remember the last debate, it was kind of that awkward moment for crypto. It's like, don't attack Bukele, don't attack El Salvador, but then he did,
yeah.
and then it was like, okay,
Well, they made
now
it
what?
well, and they told him to switch to Venezuela, right? They told him to switch to Ecuador. They told him they're like pick a different one,
Yeah,
pick any other country with a crime rate above X, and go for it, right? And but I like I said, I do think that it makes sense that this could be a real like a pivotal public sentiment change. Although I don't think of it as like a country changing investment, um,
yeah.
most likely. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's fair to say. It's not going to solve everything. And I think, obviously, even
right.
here in the US, certainly not going to solve everything. But interesting to hear Trump talking about it as a tool to maybe help solve a piece of the debt crisis, or, again, kind of how one candidate wants to use this technology. But enough about politics, I suppose. I don't know how or when coin had shifted into Meet the Press, but it's often now what we're going to be covering for the rest of the new
Yeah.
few months. When you back up and think about things, so Jacob, it's been a while since I've chatted with you. By the way, we were at Consensus in Austin. We were on a panel talking about, I think, consumer use cases for crypto. right now, aside from price, as we talked about off the top of the show, I mean, where are you looking for kind of those exciting pieces? Because we were having a chat before the show and thinking about the cyclical nature of Solana Pump because meme coins, there's almost close to like 2 million meme coins released this year. I think people are seeing that game slowly winding down. You think about what happened last cycle with NFTs, that game slowly wound down. It's like these things happen. You see explosions on chain. What are you watching as kind of the explosion to watch as you, I guess, make investments, as you look at other projects popping up?
Yeah, I think also to comment on the politics not going away thing, I think it might be the only relevant indicator between now and the next real price move is politics. Like I don't think you're going to see Bitcoin do more than 2 or 3% up or down in a day more than a few times between now and November 5th. Maybe within like 2 or 3 days before and then 2 or 3 days after, right? I think those will be where you might see moves. Also, like the poly market odds that you showed earlier, pretty much 50-50. I think Trump still has the silent 5 or 6% that are unwilling to say it out loud. And I think we have to assume the Democrat side right now is super inflated because any Democrat I've chatted with still can't tell me what they like about a potential President Harris. Like policy wise, nobody has said this is the thing I like. So I think that is probably more like 56-42. Like I think it's real far off personally. Um, but this happened with Trump literally both times. The polls
Mm-hmm.
were low, like 3 to 8%, because a lot of people just won't even say it. They'll just do it, especially women that feel pressured. That's just data, not a women comment. Um, and so, yeah, I think poly market right now. One of the other reasons I bring them up is that's one of the more consumer use cases right now is essentially degenerate gambling on things via poly market. Uh, we like to call it prediction markets and we like to call it sentiment trading or whatever we want to call it, but that's degenerate gambling on facts that may or may not occur, right? Like, is Trump going to say the word Tesla in this 2 hour interview or
Yeah.
not? That's degenerate gambling. That's not even a relevant. It's nothing about that's relevant. That's just degenerate gambling, and I think that's fine. It's just easier to call it what it is than it is to be like, no, I am an incredible seer of the future. It's like, come on, man. Like, it's just sports betting, politics betting. They're all the same thing, right? That's
I mean, is that
that,
so? I mean,
and
is that, I guess, what is that indicative of kind of where we're at in terms of the projects you're looking at as an investor, like just kind of like the cycle that we're in is like, okay, that's what it is.
well, that's what I'm gonna say is like I think the current meme coin cycles are different than the old meme coin cycles. The old ones were like there's just Shiba or there's just Doge or there's just three different ones you've heard of and that's it. Now it's like oh there's 18,000 new tokens a week on three different platforms. None of like have you ever heard of XYZ? It's like no dude you have 60 holders. Like you like you have 200 holders. It's not to knock it. It's just to catch fire. It's like you need the right coordinated social media pump and reach, and you need 5,000 people to hear about it within a day somehow, like Brett or Billy or whatever, right? But at the same time, even me mentioning them on this show isn't enough to move the needle at this point. And
No, I mean
so,
it's not, despite how impactful and how many times we've moved markets before. But I will say, when you look
right,
at this and
that's
you step
that's right.
back, when you step back and think about uh, I guess community-wide bets. This is something that we were chatting about a lot last week. Is Tron is essentially trying to copy what just worked for Solana in terms of launching their own
Yep.
meme coin platform, Sun Pump, and now you got Tron up more than 100% this year. A big pump in terms of everyone saying, "Look, Justin Sun can run this back," but I'm not entirely convinced he can because of what you just said. There's kind of I think exhaustion in the meme coin trade, and just because you can do it on Tron doesn't mean people are going to want it. But I could be wrong.
I think anything related to Justin and Tron is all that matters is Justin. Like all that matters is how many incentives is he going to put in there to trade, and how much of that is his personal capital stack, and who's more willing to lose $100 million in a day, right? Degens or Justin? And the answer is Justin. He's definitely willing to lose $100 million in a day if it gets a bunch of people to show up to his casino. So I do think, when you look at the incentive structure of any new L2 or any new thing that's coming that may or may not have an airdrop, they're trying to incentivize use and they're trying to, convince you an airdrop will come or whatever. Well, we know Justin can just put $100 million on the table and say, today's gambling is going to be for this $100 million, and either I walk home with it again, or you all can have it, and then let's try again tomorrow. And the house always wins, right? It's 52 to 56%. House always wins. That's how it goes. So the longer you stay, the longer he's going to win, or anyone on the house side is going to win, right? Pump Fun is winning right now. Poly Market is winning right now, right? Like the house wins, and so yeah, I think that is. I'm not bullish or bearish drawn doing gambling stuff right now, whether it's meme coins or prediction markets or whatever. I think it's always an interesting question with Tron of like, where are the users coming from geographically?
Yeah.
Like, if you're in the US and you're already doing stuff on Solana and or Ton, like why would you use Tron if you're a new user? You know, you're 2022 or newer to crypto. Why would or wouldn't you use Tron? And the answer is just incentives. If
Yeah.
you're paid enough to use it, you'll use it. If you're not paid enough to use it, you have no reason to use it.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen that before in terms of when incentives run out if people shift to other
Right.
sides. But it is one of those ones that, we haven't really talked about this year until now, all these shenanigans. And to go full circle, Justin Sun also coming out and saying he wants to set up a DAO for Pavel to help in the Telegram fight. So there's also that. He is inserting
Yeah.
himself in the news cycle. Very smart man. Jacob, before we let you go, anything to watch this week you got your eyes on? I know obviously it's been kind of an up and down, somewhat of a weird summer. As you said, you could have stepped away and missed all of August and picked right back up where you were. But what are you kind of looking at? I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think I'm going golfing on Thursday, so I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
I think the Harris campaign, I think, really has to do or say something this week about crypto, or it's going to be a really weird next 6 weeks. But we're supposed to get our first potential Harris interview before the end of August, is what they've been saying.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe she'll sit down with someone that asks questions, and we'll see that this week. And I think, I could be overdoing it, but I do believe that the political cycle and like practical policy stuff is going to be one of the only relevant price movers for Bitcoin over the next 6 months.
I can't
And
say that
so,
you're wrong. I cannot say it because it's what we've seen play out. Whether you like it or not,
yeah,
Trump trade has kind of taken over the crypto market, I think. And you could say potentially even that the reason why we hit 64 over the weekend was because of what you mentioned earlier, which is his odds seem to be up. And
yeah,
RFK endorsed him. So you got that going for him.
yeah.
But
And I'm
September
willing to
10th
say that
is the debate.
I'm willing to say that Pavel and Ton issues is also bullish crypto, as it should be, right? As it should be. If you think of something as decentralized money and decentralized tech and decentralized opportunity, and you see a guy going to jail because of decentralization, like that means either decentralization dies because you're scared or goes bullish because that's the better option. And so I think that's involved in that trade as well.
Yeah, no, it's all coming together. And again, all of these things are crypto issues when it comes to freedom of speech. Code is law, the ability to kind of do this. And you got a guy sitting in jail right now. So we're going to be watching it potentially 4 days. So we'll see an answer this week. More details to come out, I'm sure. But Jacob Martin, GP at Two Punks Capital, can't thank you enough for coming on, man. This was fun. You got to do it again and enjoy golf on Thursday, dude.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Catch you later.
Right on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That's Jacob Martin. For everybody here at Coinage, thanks again. Per usual, you can check out the biggest headlines in crypto and Web3 at coinage.media and can join us in co-owning the fastest growing US-based crypto outlet out there that lets you own a chunk. You can go to coinage.media to learn a bit more. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in.